Hey guys. I'm in a pretty good mood today. I think I have some good news about my car, if this mechanic comes through. I know one of the things is I bought ticket to this concert next month that I kept thinking, like, am I going to be able to go to it? Like, I keep trying to venture out there and then something happens and so I'm kind of constricted because it's, I don't know, an hour and a half away. Um, But so that might be a positive in the future, but trying to keep that positive mind frame, which brought me to thinking like I had researched about a podcast and I'm working on that. And it's always been like the fear of the unknown that I've had. Feeling like it's what's I don't know what's gonna happen that scares me. But then realizing like doing all this stuff by myself, like, okay, well, if you're gonna venture out, learn the other avenues of media to share what you say. So learn about a podcast, learn about YouTube, learn about, and reminding myself, like, just a few months ago, you wouldn't have started this channel, but you did. And you taught yourself as you're going, and that's okay. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know exactly what's going to happen, because the only thing you control is you. So, that just brought me this morning to thinking about like I guess the maybe the way we were raised and the way we convinced ourselves of what's normal and then how that makes us think and feel and how it affects us. So a good majority of my life has been like fear of the unknown because I would just, put all my faith and trust in somebody else, and then they'd let me down. And it would make me so sad that, I lost trust in that person. But then it also made me lose trust in myself because I would just be like, you stupid girl. Why didn't you see this coming? Why didn't you know this was going to happen? Well, we can never truly know what's going to happen. That's the future that hasn't been, hasn't happened yet. And a lot of times this will send us into the past. And I had said in another video, like, I always felt like I was on this hamster wheel. Like things are just out of control and I never know what's going to happen and it's scary and that's why I need all the details and that's why I need like an anchor, and then realizing through this awakening journey that I've had, reflecting on myself, that I can't control anything else but myself, my viewpoints. I can have empathy for other people and see their points of view, but I can't control what anybody else does or how they perceive me. But so it brought me back to what were some of the ways that I used to think. And, they say like when we stick in our comfort zones, a lot of people stay in what they think is their comfort zone and then realize like if it's my comfort zone, how come it makes me feel so bad? How come it makes me feel so negative? And that would be where our thoughts and our feelings would, play on each other. So I wrote down some stuff about, if you're raised where like the negative mind frame is normal, like expect the worst, or you're not in control of anything, everything's dangerous, then you would think that's my normal, that's my comfort zone. But if it makes you feel bad, if the results make you feel bad, then that wouldn't be comfort. Just like if you're raised in chaos where things are switching and changing all the time and you think that's normal, because I would say, yeah, I'm adaptable, I'm flexible, I could do things on the fly. Like that was my childhood. We were moving all the time. Um, I can adapt pretty quickly. Here's the new school, here's the this. But then thinking back, like that didn't make me feel safe. That didn't make me feel good. It had only been, for years that years now that I had said, like, chaos does not make me feel good. The switching stuff up all the time, I may be good at it, but it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make my mind feel good. It doesn't make my body feel good. So then I'd, try to plan. Be like, okay, well, I'm really good at planning. I was always good at planning for other people, but not for myself. And I had started planning for myself. Okay, well, how am I going to do this? And then realize, like, okay, I'm scared sometimes of the future, but I'd rather try and try for the positive outcome, try for the thing I want to do, than to stay in the chaos of, like, I don't know where anything is. I don't know what's going on. Just leave it up to everybody else to decide, because that wouldn't make me feel good. For the longest time, it was like being, I guess, my thing about people pleasing would be when I felt like I was forced to people please. That had been a lot of my life where it was like, I don't want to do that. But if I don't do that, that person's going to make me feel bad. That person's going to make me feel like I'm a bad daughter. I'm a bad friend. So it was like working against, to avoid the negative. But then I just feel used, where it's like, okay, I've adapted. Because they say, like, treat people how you want to be treated. Well, you can do that, but then if that person doesn't treat you the way you want to be treated, you might get your feelings hurt. And then you become resentful, to where it's not about, I'm doing this so somebody can tell me I'm great. It's like, I'm doing this so that somebody doesn't tell me that I'm bad. And it makes you feel like the other person's controlling you. So to me, that was normal. I would be guilted so many times on, well, if you don't do this, I'm not going to do this. And so it would build up this negative feeling, and then I'd get mad at myself about, like, you didn't want to do that. Why did you do it? To avoid them thinking, some negative thought about you. Well, now you think negative thoughts about yourself. And so I think that's where, like, independence would be a threat. It's like when you move out of your comfort zones, everything feels kind of threatening for a while, where you're like, I'm not really sure about this. It was easier just giving in, but then realizing, like, that doesn't make me feel good. That just means everybody expects me to lay down and take it, to be quiet, to, be whatever they want me to be. Because then that would make me feel used. And I would say, like, I'm not a tool. But if we allowed others to treat us like a tool, or to treat us like this is what you should do, then that just brings on that negative feeling you're trying to avoid, but it, like, works against you. They may not think that I'm bad because I did whatever for them. But now I'm mad at myself because that didn't make me feel good. I feel used, or I feel like I'm bending all the time for everybody else. And then where's that person for me? So that's where it'd be like, I taught myself boundaries. Boundaries with clients, boundaries with relationships, boundaries within myself of, telling, somebody's trying to make me feel guilty if I don't give in. Well, that's on them if they get mad that I have this boundary. But the boundary is there to protect us. So then it would be like, well, that's their decision if I say no and I don't give in. I'm not going to be responsible for their viewpoint of me. And then I avoid feeling that feeling of feeling used, feeling like I have to give in, feeling that it's okay to say no. I think a lot of us were raised where we couldn't say no to others. where we felt like we couldn't say no because that would be selfish. But sometimes you have to say no in order to protect yourself. Because if people just assume, they're always going to say yes, it makes you the yes man, where you're like, I'm expected to give in. So I had started putting up boundaries, even though that wasn't my comfort zone at the time. But reflecting back to myself, that thing you thought was your comfort zone, that's not comfort. Comfort's supposed to make you feel good. But if you're constantly sacrificing for others and giving in, that doesn't feel good. You end up feeling used or like a tool. So another thing was, if you attach your emotions to somebody else, a lot of us, I think, would keep people at arm's length for a while because it's like, I don't want to be vulnerable and show my emotions because then if that person leaves or rejects me, it's going to hurt more. So I'm going to stay detached a little bit rather than because vulnerability makes me feel unsafe. Vulnerability gives that person the opportunity to hurt me. I had learned over years, since I've been here, like vulnerability is okay. You can be vulnerable with people. With my clients, a lot of times it would be like, I have to be vulnerable. I'm not a robot that's just taking them to an appointment or something. Sometimes I would share stuff that I'd also been through or, share something that I guess sharing something I'd been through or endured or a feeling that I had. And that's empathy that we would connect with other people. And then knowing like it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes. You have to be selective and realize how much you can be vulnerable. But for me, it was like vulnerability is not safe. Because then if that person leaves or rejects, it hurts more. And then we get mad at ourselves. It comes back to ourselves all the time. And then you think, well, next time I won't be vulnerable. But if we were taught, like, don't ever be vulnerable, we just stay emotionally detached from everybody and everything, including ourselves. And that's not a comfort zone. That keeps you isolated within yourself, feeling like you're disconnected from everybody else. Another thing was like competition. I know I wasn't raised to be competitive within the family. It was like I was raised to be competitive with myself. Of like, why didn't you do better? But I was used in comparison. Like I always wonder like, did my siblings, were they compared to me academically? Because I was the straight A student for a long time, or I was better at schoolwork. I'm a very good tester. I would say like I'm very good at taking tests, but if you test me like a week later, I might not know that information because it's on to the next test and the next test and I think a lot of that had to do with I can't visualize, like it's not stored there for that. But not knowing that at the time. But like if you're raised to be competitive, I'm sorry. My voice is a little hoarse just from I've made other videos and tried to talk things out, and sometimes I'll, get into it and then be like, oh man, now I'm at a blank. Let me start over. So with competitiveness, if you're raised to be competitive against people, like our world is very competitive, then you might think that's normal. But then that puts everything on like a game level. It's not our job to compete with other people. It's our job to like be competitive with ourselves. Like, can we be better than we were yesterday? Because, if you think about games, like, yeah, the team is playing another team, but they're trying to be better than they were last week in it. But if competitiveness is all you've ever known, then you will turn everything into competitiveness. If you always feel like you're less than everybody, then you probably will always feel like you're defeated. Like, why try? That person's already better. Rather than, you try and improve yourself to get to where you want to be, not necessarily where somebody else is. So then self-sufficiency might be scary to you. Independence might be scary to you. Competitiveness with yourself might be scary if you never knew that before and you're just competitive with everybody around you. My thing was teaching myself to not think that I had to be perfect. And I stated in another video, it was the person that I used to know that I said, you just want me to be perfect. And they said, no, you do that to yourself. I don't expect you to do everything, but if you try to do 20 things and that 20th thing is wrong, you erase all of it. You erase everything that you did and think you're awful, and that's not the truth. And it was because I believed this person's words, and self-reflected them back, that I said, oh yeah, you're right. I do that to myself. Okay, well, I don't have to do that to myself anymore. I don't have to try to be perfect. I can only do so much. And, like, I was raised to act tough, to where you're not supposed to ask for help. You're supposed to be independent. You're supposed to, crying is for babies. Stuff like that, where I would say, yeah, like, I act pretty tough, but, deep inside, I'm pretty scared. But if people didn't know me, they would think she's just really tough. Where I would say, like, yeah, I'm good at being that way, but I'm also scared. So it was teaching myself to be safe, to feel safe within myself, to know, like, okay, I can act tough all I want, but am I going to go walking down the street at midnight in a bad part of town, where I'm fearful that something's going to happen to me? No, because that wouldn't make me feel safe. Doesn't matter how tough I would act, and sometimes I think, now this is just me talking about being a female and being in my feminine, but I would say, like, yeah, if I'm more in my masculine aspect, because we all have masculine and feminine aspects within us. We all have those sides. Be like, yeah, if I'm more in my masculine side, I'm pretty tough. In my feminine side, I'm pretty scared, because it's a scary world out there sometimes. I'd say I'm a female. I know I'm a female, so I know biologically men have more upper body strength. Like, if I go hand in or toe to toe with a masculine, a biological male on push-ups, he's probably going to beat me, even if he has the same body weight, body mass, whatever, because his biologically, the anatomy is, they're made with more upper body strength, just like I'm made with, more lower body strength. That's the anatomy and the biology of it. Now, there are, if I built myself up and, got more buff and all that, I might beat them. But that would be me, working on those different aspects to strengthen them. So I would tell, like, guy friends or partners, I'd be like, do you know what it's like to be a female in this world? Do you know what it's like to be in your feminine in this world? It's pretty freaking scary, you know? And they would, it's like I would make friends with guys and they'd be like, we like you because you act tough, because you like sports, because you have that wit about you, because whatever. And then when my more feminine would show up, where I'd be like crying hysterically, then they'd be like, oh my gosh, why are you acting like a psycho or crazy? I'm like, because I'm a girl. And this scared me more. Like, did you guys forget about that? About the other part of me? But so being vulnerable and being weak and expressing that, saying like I'm not acting tough. I'm showing you that I'm fearful, that I'm whatever. That would be not normal for me because I was raised, you get over it. You move on. But then I'd realize like that didn't do me any good. Like the acting tough, I can act tough all I want and eventually I'll break because nobody's tough all the time. Everybody has weakness. Everybody needs help. Everybody goes through stuff. Everybody cries. It's not sissy like, and that's where society has kind of labeled people. Boys don't cry. Girls cry all the time. Like boys aren't weak, girls are. And I think we tried moving out of that where it was like everybody has the masculine and the feminine. It's just my masculine side of myself is more confident. I was raised around guys. I had guy friends. I was raised to be self-sufficient, independent. I was the provider. I was the, you know, um, I don't, just those things that they attribute to the masculine more. That I would have guy friends that said, you're pretty funny for a girl. Usually girls aren't funny. I'm like, well, okay, thanks. Like, not as sensitive when it comes to joking around, or I'd be like, yeah, I could laugh at that too. I could make fun of the feminine part of me. I could make fun of the masculine part of me. I could laugh at myself. I could laugh at things that other people might take really sensitive. Um, but so it just brought me to like, I've moved out of my comfort zone, what I thought was my comfort zone, so much in the last several years, like really the last 5 years, of changing what's normal, what's not normal. Does this make me feel good? Does this make me feel positive? Does this make me think positive? And it was like this awakening of how I affect other people, how my actions affect me, how my thoughts, my feelings affect me, and then how that comes across to other people. But the main relationship I had, it was like then I reflected back that to that person. But that person, I think, didn't, or maybe lost faith in their words. Or they used to tell me, like, well, that's for everybody else, not me. And I'd be like, but that you're the one who told me this. So do you believe your words? Because I believed your words. And then guess what? I'm trying not to be this thing of perfection, of doing everything all the time. I'm trying to say the things that happened to me were just things. They don't define me. But I'm also saying that sometimes my actions and words affect other people. Some things are in control and some things aren't. And it puzzled me for years. Like, why is it that this butting of heads keeps happening with me and this person? Like, when we're on the same page, we're on the same page. We think a lot of the same stuff. But then why is there this sudden disconnect and this butting of heads as if it's a stranger in front of me? And that brought me to, like, they keep changing. What is the normal? What is the definition of this? What is the viewpoint? Maybe they felt out of control. Maybe they don't believe their own words. Maybe they don't believe their own actions. I would spend so much time like trying to explain that I'd be like, you told me this. I'm telling you the same thing you told me. But then they would go back to that's for everybody else, not me. Like, so I don't understand. Why would you tell people words that you don't believe? Why would you disconnect yourself from the world? Because maybe they're normal. They wanted to stay in. Whereas for me, it was like that comfort zone doesn't make me feel good. That's not comfort, and that was another thing that I'd realized, like with clients and with the main relationship that I had was like, you can tell people all that you can. You can share with people what you've been through. You can tell them these are the things that hurt me in the past that I did or that people did to me. These are the things that helped me. But if people don't want to change out of that, if they don't want to step out of their comfort zone, there's nothing you can do. I would have some clients that I would say, well, this is the way that things are working right now, so we have to update. We can't expect everywhere we go for it to work out just for us, because the world doesn't work for one person. It's working for the majority, or sometimes it works for who has the most or whatever. But it just, there's nothing you can do if that person has lost faith in themselves. A lot of people, I think, have lost faith in themselves a lot. They don't know who they are without attachments. They don't know who they are without somebody else telling them. And then it just became this disconnect of like, I'm reflecting you back to you. Do you not believe you? I would tell clients, like, remember when you told me this didn't make you feel good? And then you did the same actions and it happened again. Well, maybe next time, don't do those same actions. And then, some people would. Some people will say, oh, I want to be better, or I want to see myself, or they'd have like aha moments, and I've always been good about pointing out like different people's points of view. It had just been in the last several years that I had said, well, my point of view is this. Yeah, I might have felt like a victim for a very long time. Like things were out of control and stuff was just happening to me. And that kept me edgy. But then I realized like there are things I can control and there are things that I can't. And the only thing I control is me, my actions, my words, and anyway, So that just wanted to share a few bits about comfort zones and like if we're raised with this is the normal, and it's normally, negative's normal. I've always thought that I'm bad. Chaos is normal. I've always been edgy and on the edge of my seat and twisting and bending and turning and people pleasing and, you know, um, while I keep people at a distance because they might hurt me or while I'm competitive, all the while comparing myself to them and all that. This is my normal. You know, um, if you can't self reflect back and say, is that normal? Is that your comfort zone? Well, maybe your normal doesn't make you feel comfortable because the comfort zone should make you feel safe. Can you make yourself feel safe? Because I know for the longest time, I would put my safety in other people. But other people can make me feel safe. And then when those people would leave, or I'd fear that they were leaving, then I would get terrified to the point of, like, please don't leave me. I'll do whatever you want. And then give in. And then be mad at myself later on when I'm like, they just left anyway. You know? But changing it around to positivity, like thinking I can do stuff, doesn't have to be a threat. I don't have to think that I have to be perfect at everything. All I can do is try to be better, learn something new, work with that, go towards a goal and not have to think that it has to be perfect. Plan for the things that I can, accept the things that I can't. Realizing that I have to make myself feel safe first. I can't put my safety in other people because other people might change their mind. Other people might feel unsafe. And then if they do, then that might make me feel unsafe. Being independent, on myself, I've always said that I'm self-sufficient. I'm very independent. I can do things on my own. I can figure stuff out. It was like my emotions that I wasn't independent on, that I was like, where's this all coming from? Realizing like you're just overreacting. You're terrified right now. You're terrified of, being alone. Because being alone, makes you feel like you did when you were a kid or like you did after this other person left or, there's nothing bad with being alone. Like sometimes people do get lonely because they like somebody else. We're made to be social creatures. But being alone doesn't have to necessarily be the end of the world. And realizing like boundaries, like I can have boundaries within myself and with others of, saying like, I can only do this much. I can't give in all the time. I can't be self-sacrificial. I can't give everything that I have to everybody else because that would make me feel bad. So I would reach back to, times I told my clients, like, selfishness is not a bad thing. It's when you take it to the extremes and you act like you only exist and everything's about you and everybody should bend to your will and, it's me, me, me. That's selfishness to the extreme. That's self-centeredness where it's only about you. And sometimes we could get in those mind frames where self-centeredness is not the ego saying, I'm so great. It can also be the ego saying, it's all about me. I'm the victim. It's all about my feelings. Everybody should make me feel better. Everybody else is to blame, not me. It can work at both ends of the extremes. None of us are the complete victim and none of us are the complete villain. Sometimes we are the villain in our story, sometimes we're not. But it's all a perception, and It's all about deciding, like, what's your comfort zone? What makes you feel good about you? Do you leave that up to other people? Or can you tell yourself, the good things about you, not leave it in the hands of other people? So I hope this helps, and I'll chat with you guys soon. Bye.